What's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and I wanted to take a little bit of time today and talk to you guys about the current state of Warlock in the first build of 9.1 PTR. Ever since I released those raid testing videos and 9.1's gone live, we talked a bit about Warlock changes, AF, Destro, Demo. I think there's been a lot of misconceptions about each spec, how well it's performing, and what I sort of expect to happen in the future with each spec the further we get into actual PTR. I think people are sort of panicking with AF being nerfed. People think Destro is utterly insane, which Destro is good. I don't think it's utterly insane. And Demonology still has people who just don't really know how good or how bad or whatever you want to think it might be. So I want to cover all of that today in this video. Now, if you guys are interested in acquiring any weak auras, profiles, or add-ons you see here, they are all indeed available to you guys for free on my Twitch. If you want to swing by, hang out, ask any questions, feel free to do so. Also, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, consider maybe subscribing. Your support is tremendously appreciated. Thank you so much, guys. Quick shout out as well to my patrons. Thank you all for the support. If you guys are interested in the 9.1 Warlock spreadsheet similar to the 9.01 that I made for the very first raid tier, I will indeed be making that for 9.1 when PTR raid testing amps up a bit more, probably this week as well. The tier 3 Felguard rank of my Patreon or higher gets early access to that. So if you're interested, feel free to swing by, take a look, and go from there. Thank you so much for support. With that being said, let's get into the video. So just in case you guys aren't familiar with the nerfs to Warlock, or I guess the changes to Warlock in 9.1, we can review them very quickly here and talk a bit about how I feel they're going to affect the class. Really quickly, Dark Pack's been buffed by a crazy amount, we know that. Chaos Bolt had its damage increased by 10%. Now it's already been increased by, I believe, 22% previously, on top of the 5% Aura that Destro got, so these stacking buffs are starting to add up. Destro's not looking terrible when it comes to 9.1 PTR and raid testing from what we've seen so far. The biggest hit, though, is to Affliction. Rapture's damage reduced by 18%, pretty big. I believe this is really rough to me, but I'm pretty sure last time this is the 9.0.5 nerf, and I believe on PTR when this actually happened, it was like 350 or so DPS nerf. I could be wrong, it might be more, but either way, that nerf is back, and on top of that, they've cut the effectiveness of Malignancy essentially in half, making hit a pretty substantial hit to our single target damage, on top of, well, I mean, you know, Rapture being our AoE spender as well. AF definitely took a big hit here. Shadows Embrace has been changed, we know that, but the big things I think people are sort of missing when it comes to these changes is, number one, the agony damage increase. Agony, now people have been asking for a while that they've been saying, Blizzard, can we have AF's dots deal damage again? And thinking outside of Affliction at this point, there really aren't a whole lot of classes that have most of their damage rooted in dots. You could maybe make a case for DK before, or like Shadow Priest, but Shadow Priest is not built that way anymore. They're built different. They're single target now. So having AF's dots buffed is actually substantial. I think it's pretty solid, because here's my theory on this, is that I talked about this for a while. Warlock is a triple DPS spec class. Demonology's toolkit is essentially single target oriented with a bit of stacked cleave when it comes to hand of rule and splash damage, when it comes to demonic strength, implosion, bombers, whatever, what have you. But when you have a target that's just stuck, that's just planted, let's say for example it's this, you have just this target right here, Demo can blast this, and if there's one next to it, you can get a substantial amount of cleave on it. But if you have two targets like Skull and let's say this, for example, Demonology can't do anything because they're too spread. All it can hit is one target. But what can do insane damage to two targets like this? X and Skull, Destro, Havoc Cleave. Yeah, Rolling Havoc, yeah, Flashpoint are gone, but we've had multiple buffs to Chaos Bolt. We also have Conflag Legendary around. Triple Conflag, we have Roaring Blaze, we have Cinders, we have Madness, which increases or decreases the casting of Chaos Bolt and increases the damage. Destro has a very strong two-target profile, which you even heard people like Max talk about how strong Destro can be in a progression setting. And I agree. I think Destro is arguably the best spec Warlock has. When each spec is good, Destro, Demo, and AF in a progression setting, Destruction is the best because it brings the most to an encounter. Barring its single target damage being incredibly undertuned and just garbage, it brings solid single target damage, as well as the option to swap targets like that, put a Havoc up, and deal a very large amount of burst damage to that target, potentially holding your Infernal, holding your Dark Soul, whatever, what have you, and then swap back to that main target, while also generating resources off of it via Immolate. But when it comes to council damage, let's say you have these three targets here. Let's say you have Skull, X, and let's say we have Moon, for example. Well, Demonology obviously can't do anything here, because all it's doing is dealing damage to X or to Skull. Destro can hit these two, but it can roll an Immolate on this. That's about it, though. It can't really have a multiple havocs rolling at once. But what I am thinking might be the case is that Blizzard is trying to shift Affliction's damage profile a bit with the actual agony buff here, and honestly a bit of Sacrilege changes as well, which I think has sort of been overlooked also. Demo being our main single target spec, Destro being our 2 target havoc based cleave spec, and Affliction being our council cleave spec. Your dots are going to deal more damage again. Yeah, Rapture might not hit as hard, but you can see that they obviously want to nerf Rapture single target damage, or just AF single target. They think it's too strong. Malignancy was cut in half, and Rapture was hit as well. Which, number one, this being hit is both a single target nerf and an AoE nerf, but it means that it gives a bit of wiggle room potentially for dots to be buffed, like Agony. Keep in mind, less Rapture damage, Rapture hitting for less, the nerf to it, means that Siphon Life as a dot itself is essentially losing a bit of value also, because your dots are the effects that cause Rapture to deal damage. Your dots deal damage, but it's mainly through Rapture. Outside of that, their actual tick rate obviously is not as impressive as Rapture, but that's what people want to see. So number one, I'm curious if Writhe and Agony is actually going to pull ahead of Siphon Life when it comes to 2 target, 3 target, and even single target potentially, because a 20% increase to Agony's damage, Writhe was buffed to stack to 18 and also starts at 4 stacks. So you don't have to ramp as high as you used to previously. They combine Writhe and Agony with sudden onset. Number two, I'm just wondering if this is Blizzard's attempt to make Demo your de facto go-to single target spec, Destro your 2 target, and AF your 3 target council dot base spec. Let's be real here, Rapture will still be a good filler when you have 3 targets active, and let's say you have an Agony, a Corruption on all 3 of these, and a UA rolling on 1. You know, your Shadow's Embrace on 1. Rapture is still going to be a main spender, your main spender, but you're going to have your dots being relevant in dealing damage again, which is a scary thing, which is a good thing, but scary because it's hard to tune. Looking back to Antorus, we had multiple nerfs to actual dot damage, and we were still exceptionally strong when it comes to 2 target, 3 target, 4 target, this spread consistent council cleave. So I think you can sort of see as to why Blizzard might be a bit scared to buff dot damage, but I think it's the right direction and take the spec, and hopefully that's sort of the case as to what they're looking to do. I think when it comes to Sacrilege's Dark Strike as well, this is also being overlooked. Yes, okay, listen, Agony is a curse. I get it. Agony is technically a curse, but it is not one of the curses you can extend. You can extend tongues, exhaustion, and weakness. It has to say curse of X. I know it's a curse, but it's not a curse in the same sense Blizzard means. I get it, I understand, but you will not have your Agony extended by Sacrilege's Dark Strike if you do end up playing with it. But I think the big thing about Sacrilege is that people are sort of missing the 10% damage increase to Corruption as well. When we had double legendaries in Legion, when you were on like a 2 target or a 3 target fight and we had Sacrilege, the slow effect was relevant at times, but you typically played this on a lot of fights where there were multiple ads present and you were playing AF with absolute corruption, or even just AF in general, because the corruption damage is relevant. It got a 10% buff. Again, 25% increased damage to corruption is relevant. It's actually pretty strong. If you're in a 3 or 4 target setting, let's say a 3 target council based setting, like a couple of fights might be next tier, as far as raid testing is concerned, we've only seen 2 patchwork bosses. AF didn't look that good. It might be pretty decent when you get to the more council based fights. If you're in that setting, the Agony buff, the corruption damage increase, potentially playing Writhe and Agony, you might be impressed as to the dot difference between what you've seen in 9.0 playing similar builds and what you might get in 9.1. Playing a more dot based build and also having the 10% buff to Sacrilege's Dark Strike. I want to show you guys a bit of a difference here, breakdown damage wise, between 9.0 damage playing the absolute corruption build and 9.1 damage playing Sacrilege, that build. So I thought a really cool way to actually go about showing, I guess, the different damage breakdown between AF on live on PTR was actually to come to the same dummies playing the exact same gear, testing the exact same rotation with the same character. So I'm wearing Sacrilege's Dark Strike. We're actually on PTR right now because I'm Night Fae. I am Kyrian on retail, but not much really changes there. Spoilers ahead. Not much really changes there because I'm not casting the ability. I didn't cast Soul Rot either here. The actual, like, I guess, testing that I wanted to do was about a 2-minute 40-second cycle playing playing Writhe and Agony, Phantom Singularity, Dark Caller. We're not even hitting Dark Lair twice, but whatever. Dark Soul and Ruby. And what I can say is that it's about what I expected. Same opener, just going into UAs, Agonies, maintaining corruptions, all that, putting up a PS, draining, popping your ruby a little late, whatever, and going into your dark lair. And this is about all I did. I popped this. I just maintained corruption, maintained agony, maintained PS, and just rapture during PS, and that was about it. We had 2 full 2-minute CDs. The second one being at about 2:25ish, just to align it better with our PS. Ruby Dark Soul, and you went. This is the actual damage breakdown on screen right here from the live version, and you can see that Malefic Rapture is our main spender. It's ahead by what, about a percent or so, give or take. Agony is going to have a lot of damage here because we're playing Wrath and Agony, and obviously Wrath and Agony, we're not playing Siphon Life either, so that devalues like Rapture a bit, but also gives you a bit more dot damage because like it's just one less dot, more damage towards Agony. We know it's going to be high playing Wrath. This is the actual damage breakdown from PTR playing Wrath and Agony. That's a good bit of disparity. That's actually pretty impressive, looking at Agony being roughly 30.5% of your damage. And the cool thing here, if you look at the average damage. That's Agony average for both of them. The average was 687 per tick on retail. The average tick on PTR is 871. It's hitting roughly for about 200 more per tick. The max crit on PTR being 3,327. The max crit on retail being 2,333. So you can see Rapture is devalued a lot on PTR. PTR, we knew it was going to be like this, but it's impressive. The dot damage is there. The corruption difference is about 1%, 15.2 to 16.9, give or take. I guess about 1.5%, give or take. It's still relevant though. Now, is that going to put... You can also make this case for absolute corruption versus Wrath and Agony, and you would see a lot more value in actual corruption. But what I'm getting at here is the dot damage is there. Funny enough, over a 235 exactly testing cycle on both, retail AF finished at 7.7k. PTR AF finished at 7.7k. Exactly the same. And this is what I'm saying. I don't think it really hurts AF's sustained AoE or council-based damage. It arguably could help AF's council-based damage because Rapture is no longer your main source of damage. So if you sort of mess up a Rapture window or whatever, what have you, your dots are still there, your agony is still there, or your corruption, or both are still there, and they're both still dealing relevant damage. Now, if I was playing Night Fae, playing Soul Rot, yes, Rapture would indeed have a bit more value here because, hey, it's another dot on every target, every X seconds, but I sort of wanted to forgo that for this testing because some people play Kyrian, some people didn't want to see the actual Night Fae versus Kyrian skew in testing, and this is also why I'm going back Night Fae on retail for now. I need to have more characters on PTR to compare things to live. But regardless, even if you had factored in Night Fae, Soul Rot on PTR, Rapture is not beating Agony. I don't believe it is. And technically it's the same on both because it'd be the same soul rot damage. The actual damage profile of AF has just been shifted. You're not going to have the same insane single target damage. You're still going to have your Shadows Embrace target, but you're not going to have the insane single targets anymore. It'll be okay, but I think I have this theory and I have assumed that they're trying to shift our single target more towards Demonology, and then Destro being our 2 target cleave and AF being our big council-based cleave. Now, how does that translate to Mythic Plus? Well, if you're playing Wrath and Agony, it's probably about the same, being honest. As long as the packs are living long enough, you're getting value, it's probably going to be semi-similar. Your consistent damage outside of your actual Rapture windows is probably going to be a little better because Agony is dealing 20% more damage. Now, I'm not sure if you're playing Sacrilege in that setting. Chances are probably not crazy high that you are, at least not for the actual slow Curse of Exhaustion effect. But it's still there. It's still relevant. This version of AF will have more consistent damage outside of your Rapture windows. AF right now is like, you have some damage, Rapture windows, and you have some damage. This version is going to be more like consistent damage, Rapture windows, consistent damage, because the Agony buff. I think it's healthy for the spec overall. The more I play with it and mess with it on PTR, the more I like it. Now, could there be changes? Quite possibly. I think AF probably will receive a few more changes. Maybe some dot damage buffs, maybe a little more. Maybe some Rapture tuning, maybe some buffs here and there. But if Blizzard's looking to take AF to more of a council-based cleave spec, I think it's actually looking pretty good. So, like I said with Destruction, it got a 10% Chaos Ball buff. So, it's not nothing. Hey, it's something. But Destro is not really something that I'm going to consider like an amazing single target spec. Is it bad? No, it's definitely not bad. It's actually gotten better with the 22% Chaos Ball buff, then the 5% Aura buff, and then the 10% one we got, what, a few days ago. The problem is that I sort of feel like I mentioned already, I think Blizzard's sort of taking it in the direction of trying to give Warlock a single target profile with Demo, a 2-target one with Destro, and a 3-target council based one with Aff. Now, I'm not saying Destro's terrible single target. It's not. It's actually pretty decent. If you look at the, I guess, live numbers here compared to the PTR numbers that are below them, you'll see a difference in the Chaos Bolt damage. It's about 28.9% on retail. The max hit is about, what, 13.8k. Now you have to factor in the actual mastery of Destruction, which is random. For some reason, Blizzard loves random RNG with specs that you want to play on progression for whatever reason. And looking at the one on PTR, the max hit is for 16.3k. Once again, RNG, this and that, whatever, what have you. But I've just, at this current point in time, the single target profile of Destro is just not incredibly impressive. The big thing, though, I think, well, it's 2-target. When you're in a 2-target setting, which is going to be a handful of fights in the actual new raid, Destro, I think, might end up pulling ahead by a pretty substantial bit. Put up your Havoc on one target, swap over to Blast the other. Think of like Rod Den, think of like Il'gynoth, think of fights like N'Zoth where you had tentacle spawns you had to kill fast. That's what Destro's good at. The snap 2-target, like just turn and burn kind of damage you can put out. Factoring in some of the legendaries that we actually have, like Cinders, looking at Madness. Madness was buffed. Keep that in mind. Madness was buffed, I believe, like a month and a half ago, give or take. The duration was extended by, I believe, half a second or so. Yeah, from 3 to 4, which allows you to squeeze in like a conflict rate between the actual Chaos Bolt cast. Thus, depending on charge, and maybe even giving you an extra Chaos Bolt cast during your Havoc window. We actually tested with it sort of extensively when it came to the actual buff, but it wasn't necessarily enough with extra Chaos Bolt buff. And with Destro being in the state that it is going into 9.1 compared to where it was in 9.0, I think it's suited much better to be taken advantage of, to be used on fights like Huntsman Altamore. If Destro was in this state that is in PTR right now, in 9.0, when we went into Castle Nathria, you'd see it played on Huntsman Altamore. You might even see it played on Enerva for that snap add burst damage you need. Destro's in a much better spot for progression, I think, in 2-target settings. Although, like I said, I don't think the single target is terrible. It's just not as good as Demonology. So if my theory actually holds true, Demonology might be positioned to be the best single target spec. I mean, at this current point heading into the new raid. Now, like I said, there's a lot of time between the remainder of PTR and the patch going live, but I'm going to be honest, Demonology has actually been a lot of fun. I've been enjoying it a good bit, and that's also outside of the Demonology stamina scaling builds that we've seen everywhere. The ones I talked about a few weeks ago, I think that build's actually great, but I mean, at the same time, like, not everybody shares the same excitement that I have with that build. It's very solid, it's strong, but even having just the profile that Demonology has, outside of you getting your APTs, your Ancestral Vigors, your rallies whenever you need them, it's just good on its own. You have this large 1 minute, if you're playing Wilfred's, which in most settings I think you are at this point, this large 1 minute damage based cooldown that gives you this consistency, which is really big. And the biggest thing I feel outside of that is when it comes to triple potency conduits, Demonology benefits the most from that. When you have your Born of Blood, you have your Tyrant Soul, and you have either your Fellow Commando or you have your Carnivorous Stalkers if you're playing Dreadlash in place of Demonic Strength. Affliction can't really do that. Yeah, you have your Focus Malignancy, that's been nerfed. You still have it though, and you have your actual Cold Embrace. That's solid, but what do you play in the other slot? Corrupting Leer? Probably. But it gives you like a 2 minute, 15-second Dark Glare the more we've tested with it, which is fine, but it's not the best. It's not everything I thought it would be. You're holding your PS for a little bit for your Sauron if you're still playing Night Fae. It just sort of makes for an odd scenario overall. Now, I'm not saying it's bad, but at the same time, what does Destro play? Destro literally has what? Destro literally has Ashen Remains, and then do you play Combusting Engine? That's miserable. Do you play Duplicitous Havoc? It's only good in 2 targets, which Destro's good at, to be fair. That fits the profile pretty well. Or do you just play Burrs with Nia instead? Inferno Brand Super RNG. I think Demonology is positioned very well to be our best single target spec at this point in PTR for raid testing, whatever, in 9.1. The 2 bosses we tested have both been patchwork, but I will say Demonology has been really impressive on them. And the fact that Demo is relatively mobile, through Demonic Calling procs, through Demonic Core procs, just through Implosion, whatever thing you need to do, having those charges of Demon Bolt saved up. I played Demo versus Destro on Guardian, the first one's heroic testing. It was night and day. You can move with Demo. Destro, you get an actual obelisk, whatever is chasing you. Cool. You just sit there and do nothing. Demo can do things. Demo can move. And having that niche 1 minute damage profile that not a whole lot of classes have. Yeah, I know, Fire Mage, whatever. Outside of that, is actually pretty decent. I think Demonology is positioned pretty well to be a serious contender for single target as far as locks are concerned heading into 9.1. And yeah, I think that about summarizes Affliction, Destro, and Demo Lock in the first build of 9.1. I've gotten a lot of questions lately about, is Aff dead? How's Destro? Is it the best spec out there? How's Demonology? Affliction is not dead. It's just better in spread council cleave due to the Aff or the agony buff, and also the corruption buff, sacrilege change, whatever you want to call it, could potentially be relevant, potentially played in those settings. We saw it played in similar ones in Legion, but then again, in Legion we had 2 legendaries pretty early on. Now, Warlocks have not seen their new Covenant-based legendaries yet, and I'm hoping that's not going to be an issue in itself, because I don't want to leave Nightfade behind. I don't want to leave Soulshape behind. I'm really, really curious as to how they're going to be tuned, because I typically, if there's a controversial decision made, Covenants, as a company, you typically don't double down on that and make legendaries for them. So I'm hoping a really bad Covenants legendary is not BIS for us, because, well, we'll see. Either way, Aff's not dead. It's just in a different state. It could still be changed over the course of 9.1 PTR. Keep in mind, you're probably going to be in PTR for about 2 more months. There's plenty of content coming. There's a lot more raid testing coming. I'll have all that covered here, the raid testing videos, whatever, what have you. Destro is very good in 2 target. I don't think it beats Demonology in single target, but it is very, very good. Probably the best spec in the game in 2 target at this point, with or without PI, with Dark Soul in those big cleave scenarios. Demonology solid. We know Demo solid. We know it's been pretty decent for a while, and that's excluding all of the stamina, shout, APT, AV, blood decay legendary shenanigans you can do with it. Demonology just looks pretty good at this point. Yeah, okay, messing up your tyrant, getting it scuffed every once in a while sucks. It's life. It is what it is. It happens. And I think the spec benefits the most from 3 potencies compared to any other spec we have right now. Unless, or I guess until more potencies are introduced, but who knows when that'll actually be. Any Weak Wars profiles or add-ons you see here, you can get for free off my Twitch. If you want to swing by, ask any questions, hang out, feel free to do so. At the same time, if you have any questions and don't want to come by, drop them in the comment section here. I will be sure to get back to you. If you guys are new and enjoyed the content and want to see more, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons below. It helps out a lot. Once again, shout out to my patrons. Thank you all for the support. Appreciate it. 9.1 Warlock spreadsheet will indeed be going up probably within a week and a half or so on Patreon. The tier 3 Felgar rank or higher does indeed get early access to that if you're interested. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.